Hello and welcome to the latest interview from Casino Live Sports Betting Operator TV. I'm Peter White, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with one of the true pioneers of the international gaming industry, Michael Boettcher, founder and president of Storm International. For more than 3 decades, Storm International has been one of the industry's most recognizable names. From its origins in Moscow during the early 1990s, the company quickly established itself as a leading operator in the region, launching some of the most iconic casinos in the post-Soviet era, including the famous Shangri La brand, which has become synonymous with luxury gaming entertainment. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
I'd like to firstly thank the old management of the Metropolitan Park Lane for allowing us the VIP room in this marvellous casino. Michael, let's start at the beginning. How did you first find your way into the casino business?
I became a dealer in Charlie Chester's in 1972. And I went for an interview. I was accepted, and we trained for 2 hours a day, 5 days a week for 2 weeks. And then they threw us into the Golden Nugget and we dealt blackjack.
So you began your career as a croupier in London. What were those early days like, and what lessons do you take from that experience?
Wow. It was fun. I mean, I was young. I was 24. It's a very social atmosphere, always. It was then, because everybody was young. And I went from Golden Horseshoe across the road into Charlie Chester's, and then to Playboy Club, which was 40 guys and 500 girls. So it was. What was it like? It was fun. And from there, I went to Iran. Spent a year, a week, and a day. And from there, I went to the Bahamas and became a craps dealer.
What inspired you to move from tables to the boardroom, to go from being a casino employee to building your own company?
Luck. It certainly wasn't. It was never my intention or my belief that I would rise above working in a casino in a middle management, because I used to get fired a lot for expressing my opinion, which wasn't welcome. So, it's such a long story, Peter, as to how I got there. It was all happenstance, really. You know, my wife left me. I was miserable. And then an American company asked me to, I'll try and give you the fast version, to go and have a look at the possibility of casinos in Ukraine, along with the son of the owner. This was in 1991, right after Perestroika. The borders were opened, and there clearly was an opportunity to go in there, but nobody knew how to deal with the situation that had changed so dramatically. So we went to Ukraine together, which was a complete waste of time. It wasn't going to work. But so I said as much to the son. And we were just about to leave, and his father called from America and said, "Seeing as you're in Ukraine, we're in Kiev. We've had another offer to have a look at something in Russia. Can you please fly to Moscow?" Which was only an hour's flight, still is. So we flew to Moscow, and I understood that this was completely different from Kiev, even though they were basically medieval cities at the time. I mean, nothing had happened there for 100 years. 1917, the world stopped, really, for the Soviet Union. And in 1990, they woke up and they found out that, there are electric drills and washing machines and staple guns. They didn't have anything there when we first, up until that point. And I suggested that there was an opportunity. So I came back in January of 1992 with the object of opening a casino as a project manager for that company.
Were there any individuals or experiences in those early years that helped you shape your leadership style in business?
No. It was all by osmosis. While working as a dealer, which I did for almost 20 years, I learned more about what not to do than what to do. Because when I would ask questions, I would very often not get the answer that I was looking for. If somebody asked me to do something, of course I would do it because I was an employee, but I would often ask why, and very often I would not be given an explanation, which I found curious, because if you're going to ask somebody to do something, surely you should be able to explain the reason for asking them to do that particular thing. And I also learnt that most of the management didn't really know what they were doing. The promotional aspect relating to casinos, you go from dealer, so you become a good dealer, and it's a very social atmosphere as well. So most people were quite likable, and as long as you were liked, then you, after whatever period of time, they said, "Oh, well, you know what? I like you. We're going to make you an inspector." And you pretty much knew what an inspector was, because as a dealer, you had an inspector watching you, and you saw what they did, which was basically nothing. But you got more money for doing it. So then you became an inspector. Where's the training course? There is no training course. Okay, so now you're an inspector. And as an inspector, you sometimes you stood up and sometimes you sat down. Then the pit boss would come over and talk to you, which wouldn't happen when you were a dealer, because you had to focus on the game. So as an inspector, you're speaking to the pit boss, you talk about football and all that stuff. You know, it was more a social business more than anything else. And then one day they said, "Okay, you know, we like you. You're a nice guy, and we're going to make you a pit boss." And you say, "Well, is there a training course?" No, we don't have a training course. But because again you've been talking to the pit boss, you saw what he did, which was not very much more than an inspector did. So then you became a pit boss. And then you started speaking to shift managers. And guess what happened? You're going to be a shift manager. Wow, shift manager. So there must be a course for this. No course. No, you just, now you're a shift manager. You just do a little bit more than a pit boss, which is still basically nothing. And so there you are walking around, you know, how are you doing? Good, great. How are you? Fine, you know. Any decisions? No, we don't make decisions here, because if you make the wrong decision, you're going to lose your job. I remember asking my casino manager what the time was. He said, "You know what? I'm not sure. Go and ask Bill, just to, you know, his watch works. Because God forbid he gave you the wrong time and it came back to haunt him." So they would make no decisions at all. And now you're a casino manager. And I remember I was dealing craps in International Sporting Club, and the casino manager, Jack Wagoda was his name. He came over to the table, and I'd been working there for about a year. I never worked anywhere for more than 2 years. I either left or got fired. And he said, it was in the afternoon, there's nobody playing, and he came over and he said, "So, you know, of course I know the game, but could you just run it by me again?" So I thought, you don't know the game. But okay, yeah, of course, Jack. So what would you like to know? He said, "Well, let's start from the beginning." I said, "Well, you get given 5 dice." He said, "Well, I throw all of them?" I said, "No, Jack, you just throw the 2, because, you know, it's only up to 12 that we have on the table." I thought, this is going to be interesting. So got the stick man, gave him 2 dice. I said, no, you pick up the dice and you throw them, and if you throw a 7 or 11, you win. 2, 3, or 12, you lose. What? I said, if you throw a 7 or an 11 on a come-out roll, you win. And if you throw a 2, 3, or 12, you lose. Okay. Right, okay, I think I've got it now. Thanks very much, thank you, and walked away. And we all looked at each other and said, he doesn't have a clue. And he's the casino manager. Shouldn't you know the game?
Yeah.
So what did I learn? I learned what not to do. So when I went there and I found myself, because how I became an owner is another quite long story, but I did, and I decided that I would never treat people the way I had been treated, and neither would anybody working for me. And the key was, number one, always treat people the way you would like to be treated. Always have an answer to any question. And be kind.
Right. I mean, but you were based at Charlie Chester's, weren't you? For
Yes.
a couple of years.
A year.
Yeah.
2 years. 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. And that was very high standard.
No, it wasn't.
No?
Oh, we were in Soho. It was all gangsters.
Yeah, but...
I dealt blackjack one day to a guy who walked in wearing a tracksuit, which in most casinos you had to wear a suit and tie. He got 20 with about 5 cards.
Right.
And I had a 3 or something. And I went, 3, 7, 9, 13, 15, 21.
Oh.
I said, he said, hold on. I said, what? He said, you broke. You busted. I looked at the car. I said, no, I didn't. He said, yes, you did. I said, no, I didn't. And he went like this. I said, oh, yeah, I did. I didn't realize. I said, what are you doing with a gun in a casino? I said, and so I turned around to look for my inspector, right? The next level up that I was aspiring for, which I wasn't actually. I loved dealing. I never wanted to be promoted. And I looked, and as I looked, I could only see his back. I went, no cameras, of course. Right. So, yeah, good luck, sir. And I went, excuse me, can you get me off this table, please? It was not high end. And and they put you in the Golden Horseshoe first, because every pickpocket, drunk, I mean, they were, as soon as you went on the table, you were a rookie, right? You've only been 2 weeks training. As soon as you dealt, as soon as you turned your head, the guy on the M box who had 20 put more chips on. And then the pit boss, who actually did do a good job, said, hey, Jack, take the money off. And I went, what happened? He said, don't turn your head. I said, oh, yeah, of course, don't turn. So I learned that way, and I learned so much more by doing it that way than by, I think in New Zealand, when they first opened casinos, they had 6 months training for gaming staff. I can teach. I opened my own schools in London. I was the first person to have dealer schools in London. I did do that, by the way. And it was, we did 4 weeks, but that only really had to do with craps. But you can teach somebody to deal blackjack honestly, in a week. It's so simple.
Yeah, but I mean, I go back to Charlie Chester's. You're being a bit dispassionate yourself, because as I understand it, they did have a high standard. You had to be able to do your job.
You had to be a good dealer.
Yeah.
And you had to play football as well.
Oh, okay.
Because that was the question they had. The first question they asked you when you went for the interviews, do you play football? I said, what? He said, do you play football? I said, yes. He said, what position? I said, defender. He said, okay. And then a couple of other questions, and then when can you start? You can join the next training school, which was the following week. That was it.
Fair enough.
It was not a heist, and you had to have been in prison for GBH to be security in Charlie Chester's.
Well, that was the Wild West then, wasn't it?
It was fun. It was fun.
How did the idea of the Shangri-La brand come about, and what made it stand out from the other casinos at the time?
Me. Simple. I believe in sharing the running of a business with the people who you hire to help you make the business grow. But I also believe in a benevolent dictatorship, and that's what I am. I listen to what everybody has to say, and very often change my mind as a result. But ultimately, I understood I had to make all the decisions. So that's what I did. What was the question? Remind me the question again.
Was the idea of the Shangri-La brand?
We just, again, we sat down and said, okay, we need a name. I'd already opened several casinos. King's Elite Casino was the first, and then King's Casino, Queen's Casino, and so on. And I was the one who came up with the names. And then we had the opportunity to build from an existing casino, which was called Caro, which was in a cinema building, and there were lots of other places in there as well, including a nightclub, disco. And I gradually took over the whole building and made it into what for Moscow was quite a big casino at the time, although subsequently they built bigger casinos. And I realized I had to so I had to come up with another name. And one of my favorite films ever was Lost Horizon, in which there was a plane crash, and then they walk through the mountains and the Himalayas somewhere, and they come into a valley called Shangri La, which was the perfect place where you live forever. And I thought that was appropriate, so I used Shangri La. But then I had a problem with a Shangri La hotel chain, because they sued me. They disputed that they said I couldn't use the name, and we went to court in Paris, and I won because I didn't go, but we had lawyers and it explained that we have Shangri-La casinos and they have Shangri-La hotels, and they're not the same. Every city in the world has an Indian Shangri-La restaurant, so why weren't they suing them? But they took exception. And there was only one casino at the time. And since then we opened more. We opened in Latvia, a Shangri-La casino. And again, they said, you can't use the name. And I said, no, you can't use the name because it's my name. So it's one of those silly things that people have nothing better to do. But that's how the name came about. You asked me about the name Shangri-La and why I used it. And I already told you from where I got it. It was from a film and a book. But interestingly, when I told my partners that we're changing the name from Caro, which was the name they had for their casino, was named after the partners, and then they brought me in, and we're going to change it to Shangri-La. And their first reaction was, what's Shangri-La? We never heard of it, which when you say it in Russian is Что такое Shangri-La? What is Shangri-La? And then I told some other people the same story. I said, yeah, but I'm going to call it Shangri-La. And all the Russians said, Что такое Shangri-La? And then my partner said, we want to call it the Queen of Spades. I said, well, it's a mouthful. You're not going to call it that. And they said, what about Amazonka? I said, no, we're not going to call it that either. We're going to call it Shangri-La because it has it flows and it actually represents paradise. So it has a very good connotation. And then I spoke to my marketing director and said, I want you to take billboards all over Moscow before we open. And I just want you to put on the billboard, Что такое Shangri-La?
Oh, clever.
So I think we got, I can't remember how many, 100, 200, I have no idea. And it was about a month or so before we opened. And then I went to my other casinos, and I used to play poker. Well, I still do. And we'd be sitting around. And I remember one evening in another casino called Jazztown, actually. The people said, have you seen these billboards around town? They said to me. I said, what billboards? They said, что такое Shangri-La? I said, no. Why? Well, what is it? He said, well, I'm driving here. Everywhere I look, I see что такое Shangri-La. Does anybody know? And everybody went, no, I never heard of it. Что такое Shangri-La? And then we opened. Then I went back to play poker again, and they went, yeah, you said you didn't know. I said, well, now you know. So yeah, it was that's how the name came about, and that was the reaction.
Excellent. Russia was an incredibly dynamic gaming market until the ban in 2009. How did that impact your business, and how did you decide where to go next?
Well, we were given 2.5 years notice. We were told in 2006 that we had 2.5 years. So we knew that we would close on June 30th, 2009. So we had time to prepare. So we started looking. I had a choice. I could stop because I'd obviously done very well. I went from nothing. The first casino was Casino Elite, which had 3 tables, 2 blackjacks and a roulette, to having 5 casinos and 25 slot halls with about 2,500 machines, slot machines, generating, when we closed, had been growing at 42% a year for 5 or 6 years, because it went. Shangri La was the embryo of what became. It was Storm International, but it was all around Shangri La, because that became our what's the word? Our flagship. Yeah, and that name has really helped us a lot. So I had to decide whether to just cut and run, and I did. But what was I going to do? Plus all the employees, all the people who'd grown with me, and loved doing what they were doing, as did I. So I thought it worthwhile to continue with as many people as I could, because when we closed, we had 6,000 employees. Maybe more. I never knew exactly how many there were, and some of them were just excellent, and I'd become friends with some of them too. As I said, I married my translator. So we started looking around the region and around the world, actually, in order to be able to keep the company going.
After Russia, Storm expanded rapidly into markets like Armenia, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, and even Mexico. What guided your decision on which countries to enter?
It was usually people who would approach us rather than us approaching them, because we were so successful in Moscow, and we grew the brand. And people, for example, who wanted to open their own casinos would come into Shangri-La and take photographs, and security would say, oh, these people are taking photographs. I'd say, it's fine. They want to open their own casino, and so they'll take photographs. I love competition, because I rather arrogantly say that I don't have competition. I am the competition. So let them open as many places as they want, because it would just bring more players for us. So I was very happy for them to take pictures. And you would have seen at that time many casinos around Russia that looked a little bit like Shangri-La, because they saw the success and they thought, well, if I can do the same, I'll be successful as well. So we had a very good reputation. So if people, I was approached many times during Moscow years by people from all over the world. Oh, we really love your casino. Would you like to come and open in our country? because the former Soviet Union was rapidly expanding because of perestroika, but everything opened up. People could travel, how many Russians did you know before then, before 1990? None is the answer. None of us did.
No.
I never saw a Russian growing up
No.
anywhere. So here was this huge market, it's still growing, by the way, and people would come to us. That was the main reason for opening. And Yerevan was one of the first. I think we've been there 17 years now. And it was a player who said he has a friend in Yerevan who has a casino, and he's looking for somebody to manage the casino because he doesn't think it's doing very well. So I agreed to go there, not as management, but only as a partner. And I saw the casino and understood that we could definitely do something. And subsequently, we got involved. We redesigned it. We rebuilt it. We called it Shangri La, which I was very happy to do because now I was expanding the brand. We actually opened it before Moscow closed, and it went on to become very successful and still is today. In fact, we're opening a new, because the casino is outside the city of Yerevan. It takes about, depending on traffic, anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes to get there. But the new one will be in the center of town. He's building a new hotel, probably going to be a Kempinski. And then there's a brand new casino on 2 floors, which we're excited to be opening next year. And we now have a huge database of players, so we expect to do even better.
What do you consider the key ingredients that has allowed Storm International to sustain its reputation for quality over the decades?
Management. Everything is management. And initially I hired and I trained and explained to managers how I thought that things should be done, and they in turn explained to the new people coming into the company how things should be done. I have an excellent CEO and excellent staff, senior management. The one that's been with me the least amount of time is 17 years. And the most amount of time is, where are we? How long have we been open? 34 years, so 32 years. And they're still with me. And they're either directors of the company or very high up. And because they were young when they came in, and I taught them and I drilled them, because it was my whole life was the casino. I was just so excited, and the more we grew, the more I loved it, the more I saw the growth potential, and it was just fascinating. So I love to teach everybody, and I wanted them, young minds, to, this is how casinos are. We run casinos, how I run casinos, and this is what you will do, and then they pass that on. So we ended up with everybody basically thinking the same way. I mean, if they did leave, because obviously they did, because there were so many opportunities, people would come in and poach staff all the time. But you know what? The majority of them came back because they said, I went to work for this guy. First of all, we didn't get paid for 3 months. Secondly, not nice people, so can I come back? And I always said, anybody can come back as long as they left in the correct way. As long as you gave 2 weeks notice, we might ask you to leave the next day, and we pay you for the 2 weeks, because, if it was a difficult time, you had to gauge how far you wanted to go in certain situations. But some of them, yes, you can finish out your notice period because they were sensible people. And if you want to come back, you're welcome to do so. And many did.
So Storm International made a major step into the online space with Shangri-La.com. What prompted the move, and how challenging was it to translate a luxury London land-based experience into a digital format?
I first wanted to do this in 2001, and I hired somebody to start an online casino in Russia. And he hired about 60 people, and they worked on it for about a year or maybe more. And then we were ready to launch, and nobody played because I was too early. I was very upset. because I somehow knew that this was going to happen, and then we all know how quickly it did. So in 2000, I think 16 or 17, we tried again, and it worked. Again, the person who I hired was not an online person. He worked in IT, but he managed to understand how it needed to work, and he hired his own team, and we slowly built up the business. And now we're looking at licenses in anywhere, actually, and we hope to. In fact, I just had a meeting last weekend with somebody else who I brought into the company to help us expand the business. So we hope to have Shangri La online in several countries within the next year or two.
How do you see the relationship between land-based and online gaming evolving? Will they continue to coexist, or do you see one eventually overtaking the other?
There are actually two questions you've asked.
Yeah.
Right. They won't coexist because they're different, unless a land-based operation that's been around for a long time, the longer the better, then opens an online entity and uses its existing database in order to feed the online entity that, by definition, will trust the offline entity and therefore be more susceptible to actually playing online, because they will trust the name. So it means that if you have a problem, you can actually go to the casino, land-based casino, and complain about, if you have an issue, say, what are you going to do about it? But that gives them the more stability than having an triple 19 based in
Curacao.
Yeah, Curacao or the Philippines. Then if you have a problem, although they do have obviously player development people, you're calling somebody, doesn't know who you are, and it's not the same. You're not going to have the same confidence in playing with them. So the connection there exists, but the two entities, in fact, are two different entities and have nothing in common with each other, because online is not run by casino people, it's run by techies, and land-based casinos are run by casino people by definition, who understand gaming. And I'll give you an example of how online does not understand gaming, because I went to ICE, and they were showing me, the company that shall be nameless was showing me their new product, which was a roulette machine, electronic roulette machine that they used online. They would film the machine, and then people live streaming. And it was a new product, and I was talking to the person who was showing it to me, and they said, actually, we have the developer here. And he said, let me get her over. I said, sure. And meanwhile, I played it. And then she came over. I said, and have you ever been in a casino? No. I mean, I don't mean it worked in one, but actually gone to play a game? No. And you never worked in one? No. So how do you explain the way that you set this roulette machine up, where as soon as the ball spins, you can't bet anymore? She said, but while the ball is spinning, if you look on the screen on the side, you can advertise. I said, and that's an additional revenue. She said, yeah. I said, but did you know that 80% of people don't start to bet until the ball is being spun? What? I said, never mind. Nice talking to you. Mm-hmm. So there is a perfect example of how they have no clue what they are developing, where they are just involved in the tech side, and to suggest that you could make as much money from advertising as you could from people actually betting is absurd. So will online take over from land-based, is what you're asking? No, it will. It will. This generation, of course, the younger generation will play online. Everybody's got a phone and a tablet and so on. But when they get a little bit older, they will eventually visit a casino because now they've got into gambling, and they'll be struck by the total difference between sitting at home on your bed playing slot machines as to walking into a casino and being, well, good evening, sir, how are you? Welcome to our casino, and that's what we do, of course. We're very, very, very customer oriented.
You've witnessed the casino industry transform several decades. What have been the biggest impact on how operators do business today?
Government,
Yeah.
killing the industry was such an easy target, and governments, have no clue. I mean, literally zero understanding of the business, and they just think that we take everybody's money, as if adults aren't capable of making a decision for themselves. And of course, there's a fair share of compulsive gamblers which we work with, which we try to help. But 7% of people on the planet are compulsive addictive into something. Could obviously the ones that come immediately to mind are alcohol and drugs and gambling, but sex, reading. People are passionate about lots of things. There was a guy that used to eat carrots all the time. He only ate carrots.
Yeah.
Compulsive addictive. And what did he die of? Vitamin E poisoning. Too many carrots. And he was orange when he died. So you can't then attack us because 1 to 2% of people become compulsive gamblers. And what about the other 98% who aren't, who actually enjoy what they're doing? And I like to gamble. We'll go out 2, 3, 4, 5 of us, and we'll have a punt. Why not? If you have disposable income, what's the problem? So, but governments do not recognize that. They'll tax you and tax you and tax you. We have a slot business in Germany, which when I first started about 10 years ago, it was okay. We got about 17-18% return. Now it's 3%, because the government just keeps, or the local district just raise taxes.
Yeah.
And even retroactively. I remember one of the locations in April, they said, we're raising your tax from 11 to 13%, backdated to January. How is that even possible? Backdated. We've already finished with those months. So they're killing the business. Every casino in Europe is for sale, just about.
I mean, it's difficult for people to move money now, though.
It's very difficult. Yeah, they've done that too. They make it very difficult. Again, in Germany, they've restricted. You have to wait 5 seconds in between spins. You can only play one machine at a time. But in the government-run casinos, which are only run by the government so far, although that's changed for a very long time. Recently, it changed because Gauselmann actually opened a casino. You can have as many machines as you like, and there's no delay in betting. There's no maximum bet, but if you have your own slot hall, you can only bet €2 a time. There's a maximum payout. You can have 2 machines, but they have to be 1 meter apart, and the next 2 machines have to be 3 meters from the other 2 machines. And then they send inspectors round with a tape measure. And which happened to us. And if it's 2 meters and 98 centimeters, they fine you €1,000. It's so unfair.
Because the money side's affected the leisure industry, and the leisure industry is having a tough time as it is,
Yeah, but they don't. We know the government don't understand.
Well, a lot of people commented the fact that politicians often actually don't do anything. They don't put a bet on a football match. They don't participate in anything. So they've actually got very little understanding. Just going back to the point you meant earlier, that they don't have a clue. So yeah,
And when you lobby them, when you try and explain, they don't want to understand. They're not interested. If you can even get to them, by the way. Yeah. Usually they'll make an excuse. No, we can't talk to you. We've made the decision. If you don't like it, it's your problem. And when you say, well, we're going to close, we've got 15 locations, we've got 90 employees, so we don't care.
Yeah.
That's the biggest. There's nothing else has had an impact on gaming. Only the government, because people like to gamble. You see it more and more. The growth of online is astronomical.
Yeah.
You can chat GPT it. I mean, I've got the figures somewhere in my head, but.
So what advice would you give to younger professionals entering the gaming industry today who aspire to follow in your footsteps?
It's impossible.
Yeah.
You can't follow in my footsteps.
No.
You can't, at the age of, how old was I? 44, with your wife just having left you that you loved, and be brokenhearted, and then end up going to Russia, which just transformed from a communist state into a capitalist state. It just can't happen again, can it?
Yeah.
It was what happened was a once in a lifetime chance, and I will say that I was lucky. I would also say that I learned to understand that I was good, which I didn't believe at the beginning. I just thought I was lucky, but there was more than that. So my advice, well, it's like somebody came to me more than once, by the way, but quite recently, and said, "Could I have a word with you later on?" I said, "Yeah, of course." I was busy at the time, and then I said, "Okay, hi, what was you wanted to ask me a question?" She said, "Yes. How do you become rich?" I said, "I don't know." I said, I can't answer that question. There is no formula for becoming rich or successful or anything. You just, there's so many answers to that question. You need to be in the right place at the right time. Above all, you need to be lucky.
Are there any upcoming developments or new markets that you can share with us?
Online, we're hoping to open in Armenia and Georgia, where we already have operations, as you know, and we have huge databases in both places. And that's the synergy between the two. For example, we're looking at Uzbekistan has now issued new licenses, and we've applied. Well, anywhere that we can get an online license, we're trying to. Actually, Mexico, possibly. We were just offered something in Australia, but we turned it down because Australia is so competitive. There's 160, I think, online companies already. Asia, we're looking all over the world for online and casino licenses. We're looking places, the former Soviet Union, which is really our core market, but wherever they show up.
Finally, when you look back on your incredible journey from croupier to founder and president, what are you most proud of?
The people whose opinions I changed about how casinos should be run, and the ability to teach people the proper way to run, design a casino, and how to treat people who work for you. I'm proud of that. I'm proud that when I get on a plane, when I'm flying to Moscow or all around Europe now, because Russians are everywhere, how many times people have said, "Oh, Michael, And I'll go, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And they say, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you." And I'm like, "Did you work for me or were you a player?" I don't know either. So I just go, "Great to see you. Thank you so much." I'll tell you, I'll finish up with, I flew to Moscow last year, and I'm always a little bit trepidatious, And I came up to passport control, and there's this youngish woman, I don't know, with 30, 35, maybe a bit older. And I gave her my passport, and she looked at, and they're always very grim, like she looked at my passport, and she looked at me, and she looked at her passport. She looked at me again, and I thought, oh okay. Hi, everything all right? And she just looked at me, and then she had another young lady to her left, and she went like this. She went, and then she looked up, and she went, "Oh, look!" I said, "What's going on?" And the other one went, "Huh?" She said, "So, Michael Boettcher?" I wanted to say no, but I couldn't, could I? Because she's got my name and photograph there. I said, "Yeah." And the other one came over, and she said, "Michael Boettcher." I said, yeah, that's me. And she said, "I used to work for you in Shangri La. It was the best job I ever had. Thank you so much." And I went, "Oh my God. So what am I most proud of?" I'm most proud of that. Because if you could do that to another, if you can have somebody who worked for you. And you know what? They had 2 years or 3 years ago, they had a storm party, and there wasn't one in Moscow, and there wasn't one person at that party who actually still worked for Storm, but they got online and they formed a group, and 600 people came to that party.
Wow.
And the person who was organizing it called me up and said, "Could you make a video for us?" And I said, "Of course I can." I couldn't believe it, Peter. I mean, if you can do, without trying to, but simply by trying to do your best and not, I never wanted to make money. I just wanted to do things properly. And then I was quite surprised that the money just followed. But I understood that there is a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And I'll finish by saying I learnt what not to do rather than what to do, and therefore did it differently, and was very lucky that I was already 44 before I got into a serious business, because when you're young you really don't get it. It's only when you get older that you begin to understand.
With that, I really appreciate your time, Michael.
My pleasure.
Thank you.